Good evening. I'm your host, and welcome to Kenya News Update today. In our lead story tonight, we're examining a decision that has become both routine and controversial in North Africa. For the 11th consecutive year, Tunisian President Kais Saied has extended the country's state of emergency, this time for another 11 months. The decree, issued yesterday, grants sweeping powers to the executive branch, continuing a measure first implemented in 2015 following a devastating terrorist attack. But in 2026, with the immediate threat of ISIS largely diminished, critics are asking, is this about security or is it about consolidating power? Tonight, we dive deep into the numbers, the history, and the debate surrounding Tunisia's perpetual state of exception. We'll hear from supporters who argue it's a necessary shield, and from opponents who call it the death knell for the Arab Spring's only surviving democracy. This is a 12-minute deep dive. Let's begin with the facts on the ground. The state of emergency, as renewed, grants President Said several key authorities. Security forces can impose curfews, ban public gatherings they deem threatening, and conduct searches without standard judicial warrants. The military can be deployed to assist police in maintaining order. Crucially, it allows for the restriction of movement of individuals suspected of threatening public security. Proponents point to a tangible security benefit. Since the state of emergency was first declared after the 2015 Sousse beach attacks that killed 38 tourists, major terrorist incidents on Tunisian soil have plummeted. According to data from the Tunisian Interior Ministry, the country recorded 14 significant terrorist attacks in 2015, resulting in over 70 fatalities. By contrast, in 2025, that number fell to just 2 minor incidents with 0 civilian deaths. That's a staggering 86% reduction in attacks over the decade. The government's narrative is clear: the tough measures work. However, the human rights cost paints a different picture. Local and international watchdogs have documented a steady rise in what they call security overreach. The Tunisian Forum for Economic and Social Rights reports that, in the first 11 months of 2025 alone, over 400 individuals were detained under the emergency provisions for participating in or organizing protests. Of those, 95% were released without charge within 72 hours, suggesting the detentions were primarily preventative, not prosecutorial. Furthermore, the number of applications for protest permits denied on security grounds has tripled since President Said's power grab in July 2021, from an average of 15 per month to 45 per month. This creates a chilling effect on dissent. Visual comparison of these two data sets reveals the central tension of this policy. To understand the present, we must revisit the recent past. Tunisia's journey since the 2011 revolution that ousted dictator Zine El Abidine Ben Ali has been a roller coaster. For a time, it was hailed as a democratic success story. A new constitution was ratified in 2014, establishing a mixed parliamentary presidential system. Free elections were held, but the promise was fragile. Economic stagnation, corruption, and political gridlock fueled public disillusionment. Enter Kais Saied, a constitutional law professor elected in 2019 as an anti-establishment outsider. His popularity soared when, citing the same constitutional articles he now uses to justify the emergency, he suspended parliament and dismissed the government in 2021, ruling by decree. He later pushed through a new constitution in 2022 that vastly expanded presidential powers. The state of emergency, critics argue, has been the legal lubricant for this entire process, providing a permanent justification for bypassing normal democratic checks. So, what do Tunisians think? Public opinion is sharply divided, often along generational lines. A poll conducted by the independent group Sigma Conseil in December 2025 found that 58% of Tunisians over the age of 55 support the continued state of emergency, citing security as their paramount concern. They remember the chaos of 2015 vividly. Conversely, among those aged 18 to 35, support drops to just 34%. For this demographic, which came of age after the revolution, economic despair is the bigger threat. Youth unemployment officially stands at nearly 40%, and many see the emergency powers as tools used to suppress their demands for jobs and dignity, not to protect them. This generational split is the fundamental political fault line in Tunisia today. Let's bring in our first perspective. We're joined remotely by General Marwan Zigal, former advisor to the Tunisian Ministry of Interior. General Zigal, thank you for your time. The government's case seems straightforward: the emergency law works. Attacks are down. Why not make it permanent? Thank you for having me. The logic is not just straightforward, it is empirical. Look at the map of our region. Libya is in perpetual conflict. Algeria faces periodic instability. To our southeast, the Sahel is a hotbed for terrorist groups. Tunisia is an island of relative calm, and that is by design, not accident. The legal framework provided by the state of emergency allows our security services to act with the speed and discretion required in the modern threat environment. We are not fighting a conventional army, we are fighting shadowy networks that exploit our open society. Every month, our intelligence intercepts and disrupts, on average, 3 to 5 potential plots. These successes are silent. The public only hears about the failures. The emergency powers are our early warning system. To relinquish them now would be unilateral disarmament in an ongoing war. A powerful argument from the security standpoint. But we must also consider the legal and democratic critique. With us is Amira Bouazizi, a human rights lawyer with the Tunisian League for Human Rights. Ms. Bouazizi, your organization has been a vocal critic. If security has improved, as the general says, what is the harm in maintaining these tools? The harm is existential to the very idea of Tunisia. What the general calls tools, we call instruments of fear. The state of emergency was conceived as a temporary, exceptional measure under Article 80 of our old Constitution, for imminent peril. It has become the permanent operating system of the state. The successes he cites are unverifiable, as the investigations are shrouded in secrecy. Meanwhile, the documented abuses are clear. We have filed 127 cases in the past 2 years where individuals were detained under emergency provisions for social media posts critical of the government. Not one involved a credible terror threat. This isn't about security, it's about criminalizing dissent. The emergency decree has been renewed 11 times. At what point do we admit it is no longer an emergency, but a new, authoritarian normal? That's a critical question, temporary versus permanent. Let's examine the economic dimension, often overlooked in this debate. Tunisia is in the midst of severe economic crisis, negotiating a difficult loan with the International Monetary Fund. Foreign investors consistently cite political instability and arbitrary governance as top risks. Some analysts argue the perpetual emergency creates a climate of legal unpredictability that scares off the very investment needed to solve the unemployment crisis fueling discontent. The World Bank's 2025 Ease of Doing Business report ranked Tunisia 90th out of 190 countries, a drop of 15 places since 2020. Key metrics like enforcing contracts and regulatory stability saw significant declines. Pro-business groups argue that the rule of law, not rule by decree, is the foundation of a healthy economy. But there is another, more geopolitical layer to this story. Tunisia's Western partners, namely the European Union and the United States, find themselves in a bind. On one hand, they champion democracy and human rights. On the other, they see Tunisia as a crucial partner in stabilizing North Africa and managing migration flows across the Mediterranean. The EU signed a strategic partnership with Tunisia in 2023, including over €1 billion in aid, largely conditioned on economic reforms, but with muted criticism of democratic backsliding. The Biden administration, and now the Trump administration, have prioritized stability in their Tunisia policy. This external acceptance, or at least acquiescence, arguably emboldens President Said. He faces more criticism from human rights NGOs in Brussels than from the diplomats in their foreign ministries. Let's return to our debate. General Zigal, critics say the emergency law is now used more against political opponents and protesters than against terrorists. How do you respond? This is a false dichotomy. In today's world, the lines are blurred. Social unrest, especially when inflamed by foreign actors or opportunistic politicians, can create the perfect vacuum for terrorism to re-emerge. Our primary duty is to maintain public order. When protests turn violent, as they did in the phosphate mining regions last year, blocking vital economic infrastructure, the state must have the tools to restore order swiftly. This is not about politics. It is about preserving the functioning of the state itself. The vast majority of citizens who protest peacefully face no issues. We target only those who seek chaos. Ms. Bouazizi, your response? And does the apparent support from Western powers undermine your cause? The general speaks of chaos, but he defines it. A strike is chaos. A sit-in is chaos. Demanding accountability is chaos. This is the slippery slope. As for our Western partners, their hypocrisy is noted, but it does not define our struggle. The Tunisian people ousted a dictator without anyone's permission in 2011. Our fight for dignity and democracy is our own. The emergency decree is a symbol of the old regime's mentality, a tool of control that President Said, ironically elected to break the system, has now fully embraced. Each renewal chips away at the legitimacy of the state. You cannot build a stable future on the foundation of perpetual fear. We're nearly out of time. The numbers tell a complex story. Security incidents are dramatically down, from 14 major attacks in 2015 to just 2 in 2025. Yet, detentions under emergency laws remain high, with over 400 in 2025, mostly protest-related. Public support is split, with 58% of older Tunisians in favor, but only 34% of the youth. Economically, the climate of legal exception correlates with a declining business environment. The international community offers muted criticism, prioritizing stability over democratic purity. The extension for 11 months is now official. The debate, however, is far from over. Is Tunisia trading its hard-won freedoms for a security that is increasingly defined by the state itself? Or is this a pragmatic, if painful, adaptation to a dangerous world? The answer may determine whether the last flicker of the Arab Spring survives or is finally extinguished by the very government it brought to power. For Kenya News Update Today, I'm your host. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Kenya News Update Today.